All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a massive paradigm shift that is currently saving lives in modern hepatology. For decades, doctors treating liver cirrhosis have been fighting a purely reactive battle, basically waiting for catastrophic complications to happen before stepping in. But recent advances, they're changing all of that. Today, we're exploring clinically significant portal hypertension, or CSPH. It's essentially the ticking clock of liver cirrhosis, and we're going to see how modern medicine is finally learning to stop it.
To really grasp what's at stake here, we have to start with a pretty fundamental question. What happens when the human body's ultimate filter gets backed up? Your liver is this magnificent, highly vascularized organ, and it processes an incredible 1.5 liters of blood every single minute. It relies on a smooth, constant flow from the portal vein to filter toxins and manage nutrients. But when cirrhosis sets in, scar tissue and internal constriction turn that smooth-flowing river into a dam. The internal plumbing fails, and the pressure in the portal vein starts to build dangerously.
Here is our clinical roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The hidden liver pressure. 2. The danger of decompensation. 3. Diagnosing without the needle. 4. Stopping the pressure. And 5. The future of care. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The hidden liver pressure. Understanding the plumbing.
Okay, so understanding that plumbing is absolutely key here. In a healthy person, blood flows through the liver with very little resistance. But the plumbing problem starts with liver cirrhosis. This triggers both structural roadblocks, like rigid fibrotic tissue and regenerative nodules, and dynamic constrictions, where the blood vessels literally squeeze shut. This massive spike in intrahepatic vascular resistance creates a serious backup. Your body desperately tries to adapt by building these fragile detour vessels to bypass the liver entirely, which leads to devastating clinical consequences like ascites, hyponatremia, and severe circulatory dysfunction.
And all of those clinical consequences really come down to one very specific metric: the hepatic venous pressure gradient, or HVPG. A perfectly healthy liver has a pressure gradient of just 1 to 5 millimeters of mercury. But the exact moment that pressure crosses the 5 threshold, it suddenly becomes pathological portal hypertension. The plumbing is officially backed up. But 5 isn't actually the true danger zone. The tension really builds when the pressure doubles. At 10 millimeters of mercury, the patient enters the territory of clinically significant portal hypertension, or CSPH. This is the exact moment when the risk for developing esophageal varices, those incredibly fragile, swollen veins in the esophagus, just skyrockets. Then we hit the crucial tipping point. At 12 millimeters of mercury, the ticking clock strikes. At this pressure, devastating symptoms like variceal bleeding or ascites, which is this massive accumulation of fluid in the abdomen, start to physically manifest. It's the point of no return where the liver system simply cannot handle the backup anymore. Which brings us to Section 2, the danger of decompensation, when the clock strikes midnight.
This right here is the primary villain in our story. Hepatic decompensation is the catastrophic clinical failure of the liver system. It's when the disease transitions from something silently manageable in the background straight into an immediate, life-threatening crisis. A patient can live for years with compensated cirrhosis, feeling relatively okay, but a decompensation event changes everything literally overnight. And honestly, the stakes could not be higher. While patients with compensated cirrhosis, when treated optimally, have a median survival of well over 10 years, a decompensating event like ascites or bleeding causes that prognosis to deteriorate drastically. The survival timeline completely plummets. This is exactly why early detection of that hidden pressure isn't just a nice clinical goal, it is a literal race against time.
Moving on to Section 3, diagnosing without the needle, the medical evolution.
For a long time, figuring out if a patient actually had CSPH was a highly invasive detective story. Historically, the absolute gold standard for measuring this pressure was invasive HPVP. This required a specialist to literally thread a balloon catheter through the patient's jugular vein in their neck, all the way down into the hepatic vein, just to measure the pressure gradient. It takes heavy technical expertise and is usually only available at very specialized centers. But now, we are seeing the rise of non-invasive tests. By using transient elastography, which is basically firing ultrasound shear waves into the liver to measure how stiff the tissue is, combined with simple blood platelet counts, doctors can estimate portal pressure safely, affordably, and right in a regular clinic. It's a real game changer.
This non-invasive technology led to the Bovino 7 consensus, which established a clinical rulebook known as the Rule of 5.
By measuring liver stiffness in kilopascals, or kPa, doctors can map out the risk of decompensation. At 5 or 10 kPa, you're relatively safe. But as you hit 20, and especially 25 kPa, the relative risk for hepatic decompensation and liver-related death climbs progressively higher. A score of 25 kPa actually allows doctors to confidently rule in CSPH without ever using a catheter.
But there was an early flaw in this non-invasive revolution. It created what's known as the diagnostic gray zone, because the cutoff numbers to definitively rule in or rule out CSPH were set so strictly to ensure accuracy, roughly 50% of patients ended up falling somewhere in the middle. Half the patients were left in a state of diagnostic uncertainty, meaning they might actually still need that invasive catheter to know their true risk.
Fortunately, science didn't just stop there. Doctors started hunting for indirect clues elsewhere in the body to shrink this gray zone. See, because the portal vein is connected to the spleen, a backed-up liver causes the spleen to become congested and stiff too. So by adding spleen stiffness measurement to the data, alongside specialized blood markers like the Vitro score, and feeding it all into advanced AI predictive algorithms like the NICER model, doctors can now shrink that gray zone from 50% down to just 15%. It's a massive leap in patient care.
Section 4. Stopping the pressure, preventing the first decompensation.
So we can find the hidden pressure easily now, right? But what do we actually do about it? Well, we follow a modern prevention pathway. Once our non-invasive tests identify CSPH, the whole goal shifts immediately to preventing decompensation. We bypass that old waiting game completely and initiate therapy right away, specifically with a drug called carvedilol at 12.5 milligrams a day.
And carvedilol is the absolute hero of this protocol. It is the third-generation non-selective beta blocker. Now, older beta blockers like propranolol, they just lowered heart rate and constricted vessels in the gut to reduce blood flow into the liver, but carvedilol has extra alpha-1 blocking activity. This means it actually relaxes the blood vessels inside the liver itself, directly attacking that intrahepatic vascular resistance we talked about earlier. It actively lowers the pressure and stops the clot so much more effectively than older drugs.
And this gets to the core message of our source material. Quote, "There has been a paradigm shift in recent years with a new focus on preventing initial hepatic decompensation through NSBB treatment." Why this matters is profound, honestly. Doctors are no longer waiting for a patient to start bleeding internally before taking action. By proactively treating the pressure the second it's detected non-invasively, we are fundamentally altering the natural history of liver cirrhosis.
Finally, Section 5, the future of care, looking beyond beta blockers.
Because up to 60% of patients either don't fully respond to beta blockers or just can't tolerate them, medicine is looking closely at what comes next: recompensation. For a long time, cirrhosis was seen as a one-way street. But we now know that if you can eliminate the underlying cause, like curing hepatitis C or stopping alcohol use, and keep the portal pressure down, the liver possesses an incredible ability to partially heal itself. Structural and functional impairment can actually regress.
To help the liver get there, there's a fascinating pipeline of drugs on the horizon. Doctors are testing statins, not just to lower cholesterol, but because they actually improve blood vessel function and reduce liver resistance. Anticoagulants are being used to prevent microscopic blood clots in the liver that worsen the backup, and FXR agonists are in trials right now because they target the actual microscopic remodeling of the liver's vascular system. We are literally moving from just treating symptoms to targeting the cellular roots of the disease.
Which leaves us with this incredible, thought-provoking question based on where the science is heading. If we can reliably diagnose the pressure without a needle and entirely stop the pressure with new medications, can the cirrhotic liver truly reverse its own damage over time? The paradigm has shifted from managing inevitabilities to actively restoring health, and the future of hepatology has literally never looked more promising. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope this provided a really clear view into the mechanics and the future of liver health.